G'day folks, it's Rob here, and in today's clip I'm going to be walking you through the steps I use to make up a low-tech mushroom spawn jar. We're going to then split that spawn jar up into a fruiting bag so we can grow ourselves some tasty mushrooms, and then also create another spawn bag that we can break up later again to create more fruiting bags. So we have grown using the low-tech method before. We attended a workshop and got to bring home some bags that we made up, and we harvested loads of awesome mushrooms from them. We had a bit of a break while we were renovating the house, but now we're hooking right back into it. Now the reason this is called a low-tech growing method is because we're not using the pressure cookers and other pasteurizing equipment to heat up the growing media to kill off any other mold spores or fungi spores that may be in there. What we're using is a base called calcium hydroxide. Coincidentally, we also use it in the aquaponics system. What it basically does is raise the pH, kill off any competing mold spores, and that way the oyster mushrooms have full access to all the nutrition in the media that we're going to be growing on. The media that I'll be using in today's grow is a hardwood sawdust pellet that's used for smoking. Now there are other substrates you can grow on. In the course that we did, we used the recycled newspaper that had been turned into cat litter pellets. We hydrated some of that, broke up a spawn bag, which was actual commercial grain spawn, popped that into the hydrated newspaper pellets, and then packed it away into some mushroom spawning bags. You'll also see straw used quite a lot in mushroom growing, and here in Australia we get a lot of sugarcane mulch, so I'll be having a crack at some sugarcane mulch grow bags down the line. So sterilization is key to success when it comes to growing using this low-tech method. Basically you want to sanitize every surface that you're going to be using. I use boiling water for things like the jar and the lids and the measuring equipment, and you can also use alcohols to sterilize the surface. So I'm using a 1 litre or quart mason jar, and in the top plate I drilled a hole, and over the top of that hole I have a micropore tape. Now that micropore tape will stop the bad molds and bacteria getting in there and contaminating the medium. At the same time it will allow a gas exchange between the growing mycelia and the outside environment. For the substrate mix I used a 40% pellet to 60% water ratio, so 4 parts to 6 pellets to water. Now the calcium hydroxide ratio to water was 2 grams of the calcium hydroxide to 1 litre, or roughly 1 quart of water. Give them a bit of a stir with a sterilised spoon and just let them sit until all the water is absorbed by the pellets. Now the mushroom we used to create this spawn jar was a tan oyster mushroom we bought from a local grocery store. To get it ready to add into the spawn jar, all I did was sterilise the knife and then skin the stem of the mushroom, basically just taking off the outside layer and then chopping up the stem itself and adding it into the jar. Then I'd add in another layer of the media. That process was repeated all the way to the top of the jar, and then I capped it off with just a layer of the pellet medium. On top of the jar I made note of the date and also what it was. This one was a stembuck culture, and it went downstairs with a few other experimental jars just to sit in a dark area until it started to colonize. Now we started to see some mycelia growing through the media in less than a week, but then we had a very hot summer, and I have a feeling this strain of mushroom didn't like the heat too much, so the growth slowed right down. Now it wasn't until about February this year, 3 months after the jar was created, that we started to see mycelia grow all through the media itself, and this is what the jar looks like today. You might be able to see some little brownish bits down the bottom. They're metabolites that have just been created through this whole spawning process. So yeah, they're not too much of a worry from what I've read. I'm no expert, so we're just going to leave them in there. So what we're going to do now is break up the media within this jar with some sterilised equipment, and then we'll start to pack out our new spawning and fruiting bag. So before we go through the process of hydrating these guys, I just thought I'd run through the basic ratio for spawn and fruiting bags. With the paper pellets, you're looking at 40% by weight of the pellet and then 60% by weight of the water. And then for these wood pellets, you're looking at 45% by weight of the pellet themselves and then 55% water. Now these pellets, as I said before, are a hardwood pellet. They're from Louisiana Grills. It's their competition blend, and it's made up of maple, hickory and cherry. There are other hardwood blends here available in Australia. I've seen a barbecue galore one that's recommended on a mushroom group online. I haven't tried it myself. I just came across these on sale at a large chain store, so I decided to snap up a bag. So I just thought I'd run through those two ratios before we get on with the rest of the clip. So before we get cracking, we need to work out how much spawn we have in that jar. So we'll just zero off the scales. The reason being is that needs to make up 10% of our final mix. And it looks like we have roughly 350 grams. So all up we need 3.5 kilos or 3,500 grams of media. That also includes this. So that means we need 3,150 grams of media or substrate all up. Before we do much else, I want to just sterilize the inside of this container. And to do so, I'm just going to be using some of this alcohol that Hamish gave us. Thank you very much, Hamish and Nicole. And while I'm at it, my own hands and the outside of this container where I'll be holding it. Just trying to keep everything as sterile as I can. So we'll weigh out the pellets now, and remembering our 45% pellet to 55% water ratio, we know we need roughly 1.4 kilograms of these hardwood pellets and 1.75 litres of the water. There we go, 1 kilo 400 grams. Now, just take a couple out. There we go, that'll do us I think. So onto the pellets I'm adding just under a teaspoon of the hydrated lime. And then in on top of that, we're adding in 1.75 litres of the boiling water. So what I'm going to do now is just sterilise this spoon, and we're going to give this a bit of a stir around. Actually think I might need to go and get a slightly larger container. Back in a tick. So I've got myself a brand new storage tote here that we've bought for doing some mushroom work, and just giving it a bit of a wipe down with that alcohol just to kill off any nasties. As I said before, I'm definitely no expert at this. This is the first time I've used the wood pellet method, so I wasn't quite prepared for how far these guys actually expanded. So there we go. I'm just going to give this a good mix around, and then put the lid on top of it, which I've also sterilised. And that will sit there now until the morning, until it's cooled down, and we can come back and pack our bags. So it's day number 2 now, and we're getting ready to break up the spawn and add it into our hydrated sawdust. So first off though, what I want to do is just break up some of this spawn, just to make it easier to spread through. And as you saw, I just sterilised, just sterilised a skewer, so I can break up all these paper pellets with spawn on them in the jar. Just gave it a quick whiff, and it smells very much like oyster mushrooms in there. So that is a very good sign. So I've broken up the top layer, so what we might do is take this lid off and pop it in sawdust, and we'll continue to break up what's left in the jar here. Some nice big chunky bits in there as well. We want them all broken up. There we go. Now to quickly sterilise the spoon. This is what I will be using to not only mix it all around, but add it into the bags. Give it a good stir. So the idea is the mycelium on these pellets will then start to grow out into this sawdust and eventually turn into mushrooms. So there we go. Now all I need to do is start packing it into these bags here. These bags as well don't need to be sterilised from the inside, I would think, seeing as they've come straight from the factory. So I'm just sealing up the bags and putting them to one side, and then filling the next one. So what I'll probably end up doing is keeping 2 bags for fruiting, and one hopefully we'll be able to use as a spawn bag for some future fruiting bags. Let's close him up quickly. So we're almost done now. All I got to do is just try and firm these up a little bit. and get any of the air out. So now this one here is going to be spawn. So hopefully it'll colonise and we can make some more out of this. Put today's date, the 27th of the 3rd, 20. And these guys here will be fruiting. And just put the date on these guys because I know what they are. Now there's one thing left to do now, and that is to make a little port in here to allow gas exchange. So I'm going to be using micropore tape to keep the bad stuff out, and a little scalpel to cut a hole in each bag. So again, I'm just using some alcohol to sterilise it, and I'm also just going to rub some alcohol where I'm going to be making the cut. So it's just a matter of a small hole, probably about, you know, half an inch by an inch. So I think I might actually make it a little bit bigger. I might make it about 1.5 inches long, and try and grab these bits of plastic off. There we go. Now I'm just going to cover that with some micropore tape, and we'll do that to the other 2 bags as well. And just to finish off, do the spawn one, and that, my friends, is pretty much all it for now. So there you go, folks. We have 2 fruiting bags and a spawn bag. Now these guys here are just going to go downstairs into a dark, cool area that has fairly decent airflow. And what I'll do is I'll bring you up to date through the community tab on YouTube and post a couple of photos as I see the mycelium start to run in the sawdust. So there you go, folks. There's a bit of a look at making up a couple of fruiting bags and also the spawn bags. This is only the first step though in turning this into a fruiting bag. In about 7 to 10 days time, I'm going to come back and feed this with some wheat bran, as long as everything goes okay and there's no contamination in there. And I'll be doing the same with the spawn bag as well, and I'll bring you along for a bit of a gander at that. Something happened today as well, just before I started shooting the clip. I received a bag of spawn today. This is white Queensland oyster mushroom spawn, and I can break this up to make loads of new bags, fruiting bags, and we can harvest directly, and I can even make up more spawn bags from this. So you might be able to make out there's a load of mycelia already growing through the grain there. There's a load of nice big chunks up the top. Might be a bit hard for you to see. So I'm going to use some of this spawn to make up the fruiting bucket that I did mention in an earlier clip. I did have plans on using this spawn jar to make up a bucket, but I thought, you know, because it's low tech, I'm not too sure how it will go contamination wise. So that's why I thought I'd use these clear plastic bags to begin with. And I use some of this professional sanitized spawn to make up the bucket. So I'll bring you a clip on that in a couple of weeks time. I just want this to mature a little bit more, and then yeah, hopefully we'll have a lot more mycelium growth in here, and then we can split it up and use it down the track. So I hope you've enjoyed this look at my take on the low-tech mushroom growing. If you do want to be brought up to date with the future clips on the bucket and whatnot, all you need to do is hit that subscribe button down there and then pound on the bell icon once it appears, and YouTube will hopefully send you a notification when the clips get posted to my channel. And if you are a bit bored at the moment, you can also check out a couple of thumbnails I'll pop up towards the end of the clip here, just looking at the aquaponics and a few different things that we grow around the place here. Before I go, I really do need to thank those awesome folks who are supporting the channel over on the Farm Your Own Yard website and also the YouTube membership platform. Thank you very much, folks. And as always, you can check out the super contributors down in the description below. But I will pretty much leave it there, folks. I do hope that your aquaponics, your gardens and your mushrooms are all booming, and I will catch you next clip. Look after yourself, folks, and have a good one.